One of the lines Donald Trump and his MAGA allies love to feed their base is that President Joe Biden's Department of Justice has been weaponized against Trump. How else could you explain Trump being charged with 88 criminal counts in both state and federal courts, 34 of which he was convicted of just last week? They cannot for a moment believe that the DOJ and local prosecutors are simply following through with their mission to uphold the rule of law. But just to remind you, it was Trump's DOJ in 2018 that first prosecuted Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, Trump's co-conspirator in the hush money election interference scheme. Remember, there were 3 people at that Trump Tower meeting in August 2015 who conspired together to influence the 2016 election through unlawful means. The former publisher of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, Cohen, and Trump. Pecker's company signed a non-prosecution agreement, and he received immunity from federal prosecutors in exchange for cooperation on the investigation. Cohen went to prison. And now Trump has been convicted and is awaiting sentencing for his crimes. I'm joined now by Michael Cohen, former personal attorney to then President Donald Trump, and prior to that, principal of Crisis X and a key witness in Trump's trial. He is the host of the Mea Culpa podcast, co-host of the Political Beatdown podcast, and author of Revenge: How Donald Trump Weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice Against His Critics, and Disloyal, a memoir, the true story of the former personal attorney to President Donald J. Trump. Michael, it is good to see you. I want to start on a note that is not the most pleasant, because it does appear that the consequences for your cooperation in this election interference trial have been personal, and you have thought about it and talked about it before. You were doxxed. Your family was doxxed after the verdict. The phone numbers of yourself, your wife, your children were posted early Monday morning on a site that's been used to target other figures involved in Trump's various legal issues, according to the group Advanced Democracy, which is a nonprofit research group. We know they're trying to dox the jurors, too. Talk about that experience, and do you feel safe, and are you protected?
Well, look, I don't want to get into whether I have protection or not, obviously, to give some of these maniacs an opportunity within which to come at me. But yes, we have been receiving unwanted phone calls and emails and text messages, including last night around 11 p.m. The doorbell rang, which, of course, is somewhat unsettling. It was actually the concierge in our building saying that there's a Domino's pizza that was delivered to you. And I didn't even know that Domino's was in New York City, to be honest with you. And they had it, unfortunately, under my son's name. So this is sort of the behavior that we are contending with, simply because I testified, and they're unhappy. When I say they, I'm talking about MAGA is unhappy with the results.
Yeah. And what advice would you have for these jurors? Because I think all of us in the media are as curious as people are as to who these jurors are. It seems the best advice would be for them to remain anonymous, probably permanently.
Yes, agreed. But what they should also do is what I did. I contacted my local police department to let them know that this is happening. I filed filing a police report on that, in which case they will now have that information readily available in the event that a situation arises.
Let me let you listen instead to what Chris Christie has said, contradicting whether or not Donald Trump is afraid of going to jail.
I've known him for 22 years. When I was doing these cases in New Jersey and I would put political figures in jail, he would say to me, I could never do that. I could never go to jail. And I'm telling you, no matter what he says, no matter how he's bragging and going on about him not being afraid, he goes to bed every night thinking about the sound of that jail cell door closing behind him.
Is Chris Christie right, or is Donald Trump right that he's not worried about it?
Yeah, so I actually saw the interview on Fox that Donald claimed, it'll just be what it'll be and so on. Chris Christie is absolutely 100% right. Right now, Donald isn't thinking about it. He's a very interesting guy, Donald. If it's 4 weeks away or 5 weeks away, to him, it's eternity. But as the days start coming closer, that's when you're going to see him becoming even more unhinged, if that's even possible. as it gets closer to the day of reckoning, to the day of sentencing?
Well, we will watch and see. I'm sure everybody, unfortunately, will be watching everything that he is doing. Let me talk a little bit about a piece of reporting from ProPublica. Multiple Trump witnesses apparently received significant financial benefits from his businesses. One campaign aide had their pay doubled from $26,000 to $53,000. Another employee got $2 million in a severance package, essentially barring him from voluntarily cooperating with law enforcement. What do you make of that behavior?
This is not new. You may remember quite some time ago, Omarosa was contacted by Lara Trump, and I know that recording is out there floating around, where they were concerned that Omarosa was going to provide information which could be damaging to, at the time, President Trump. And so they offered her a position at the RNC for something like $50,000 a month. This is the game. Now, why is Donald okay with it? Because it's not coming out of his pocket, so he's not even thinking about it. I mean, the fact that you have a $2 million severance, which is to Alan Weisselberg, that Boris Epstein got a massive bonus and so on. First of all, Boris is completely inept. The fact that he is a legal strategist, this is a guy who's never tried a case in his life. It doesn't make any sense. This is to keep everybody in line, which tells me that at least Donald learned something about the ordeal that's taken place between he and I.
Yeah. Let's talk about the charge by Donald Trump and his supporters that the Department of Justice has been weaponized against him. They are alleging, completely without any facts, that somehow the local DA, Alvin Bragg, was colluding with the Department of Justice, et cetera. You shared with us some documents that we know were a matter of a news item before, which was you actually were asked to sign an agreement when you were now out of jail because of COVID, and in order to stay out of jail, they wanted you to sign an agreement. Talk a little bit about that agreement, because it was unusual. This was an engagement that no one had really seen, that barred you from talking to the media. And it said no engagement of any kind with the media, including print, TV, film, books, or any media or news, prohibition from all social media platforms, etc. Talk about that.
By the way, it also included friends and family, which I thought was incredibly unusual. So I appeared at the request of a guy named Adam Pakula, who is the lowest level employee there at the Bureau of Prisons at 500 Pearl Street, where I met with him and his supervisor, a woman by the name of Enid Phoebus. And they present me with this document, which is supposed to be what's called an FMLA, FLMA, a Federal Location Monitoring Agreement. But unlike any other FLMA, this does not have any designation to it. It is not a standard form. It's not a form that has ever been, to at least my understanding in investigation, it has never been used before. It was produced specifically for me. And paragraph number 1 is this unconstitutional prohibition of me to speak, which is a violation of my First Amendment constitutional right. So I had brought my friend Jeffrey K. Levine, who's a lawyer, with me because I was concerned at how this had transpired, until ultimately, when we said, hey, this is really violative, it's really overbroad. My book is already with a publisher being printed. I would be in violation if I signed this agreement, which, by the way, is a counterfeit document. It doesn't exist in the system. They asked us to wait in the hallway, which we did, and about an hour later was met by 3 marshals who handcuffed and shackled me, then put me into a room which was probably about 35, 40 degrees in terms of temperature, and then sent me back up to Otisville for another 15 days of solitary confinement. And this was all done pursuant to my book Revenge and the research. This was all done by Bill Barr, and we all know that the only time Bill Barr did anything is when Donald Trump told him to do it. So I then got very fortunate, and my wife was able to find an attorney who you have met many times, and she was with me at the recent trial, the criminal trial, right. Danya Perry. And Danya then filed a habeas petition within which to have me released from Otisville based upon this unconstitutional remand, which was granted by federal judge Alvin K. Hellerstein, who in his order turns around and says that this is retaliation by the president and the attorney general in order to silence a critic of the president.
In short, the weaponization of the Department of Justice, but not by Joe Biden's DOJ. Michael Cohen, thank you.
And that's the funny thing, but Joy, that's the funny thing about Donald Trump. What he's doing is he's projecting. And that's what Donald does. He's projecting what he believes that everyone is as criminally inclined as he is. So he's trying to impugn that behavior onto the Biden administration, knowing that that's what his administration, not only that they did it to me, but that they intend to do it to many other people if, God forbid, 1,000,000 times he retakes the White House.
Michael Cohen, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thank you.